Jazz Chisholm Jr. is on the trade block. Bob Nightingale reporting the expectation that Jazz Chisholm Jr. will be moved by the offseason at the very latest. This is Locked on Marlins.
You are Locked on Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins.
Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked on Marlins. This is your daily Marlins pod. I'm your host, of course, Peter Pratt. Hit me up at Miami Marlins _UK. If you're listening to the pod, of course, hit subscribe and leave a review. This is your team every day. Thanks for making Locked on Marlins your first listen of the day. Happy Monday, guys. It is a bank holiday Monday here in the UK, by the way, so no work for me today, all gardening. I've been out there with the hedge cutter all day. For those that are watching, you'll kind of get a glimpse of the back hedge. That has been untouched. So before you arrive in the comments and say, you missed a bit, Pete, I know, but the front is looking on point, no doubt about it. So happy Monday, happy bank holiday Monday to all of my UK listeners. Guys, there is a YouTube channel, as I mentioned. Make sure you hit subscribe over on the YouTube channel. It's also called Locked on Marlins. Subscribe, enjoy the content. Join me in the comments as well, no doubt about it. This episode is sponsored by our good friends over at Monopoly Go. And game off, we got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go now, free, on Google Play or App Store. Game on! And boy, oh boy, let's get this episode on because there is tons to get into. It has been, boy, oh boy, it's been a wild few days for everyone that's a Marlins fan. You know, and actually, it's not just been Marlins fans. This has been a national story because the Marlins have made a blockbuster deal in early May. Naturally, that grabs attention. It grabs the headlines. The Padres are a fun team as well. And so, you know, when you have an acquiring team like the Padres that add a player like Luis Arraez, it gets a lot of attention. But a lot of national attention is also focused in on the Miami Marlins. And the reason it's focused in on the Miami Marlins coming off the back of a postseason berth, of course, is the fact that they're entering another rebuild. And whilst it may be the necessary route forward, I'm going to talk about that. I actually want to break down where my head's at, because I think on Twitter there's maybe some misconceptions maybe of where I actually feel we're at here. There's a fan element. There's an understanding of the current situation. There's an understanding of the history. There's a lot of pieces that go into this. So I just want to call that out. I'm actually going to lay it on the line in terms of where my head's at. But the reason there's national attention is the Marlins are selling again. And this question's being asked around, how is that good for the game of baseball in general? How is this situation continuing to reoccur in this market for this team? I mean, it must be the most rebuilt team. The team's only been around for 30 years or so. And already there's been, what are we up to now? Is this going to be the fifth rebuild? I mean, I've been a fan of the team since 2016. That's when I started following baseball. And so now this is going to be my second build in 8 years. So, by that ratio, again, it's tough. This is the fan element it's a tough situation for the fans to have to continually accept this scenario. And there's no other way. But frankly, the Marlins fan base has to be the most poorly treated fan base, I think, of any fan base. I don't follow other teams and I haven't followed baseball for long enough. So please let me know if I'm missing others. But when I look at the way that ownership has treated the Marlins fan base over the years since inception, it's pretty poor. It has to be bottom two, probably the worst of all. I don't know. Let me know. Who am I missing? But there's just so much that's gone into this, and there's so much distrust from Marlins fans, and there's so much rebuild fatigue. That's what it is. Fans that have been there from the very start or near to, They're fatigued by this situation. It's the same message. Actually, let's kind of get into it. Let's talk about it. Here's where my head's at in general. Peter Bendix, appointed president of baseball operations. As you know, I've been covering this team every day pretty much since the appointment. So there's a lot of stuff on tape and a lot of episodes I've covered talking about this. Bruce Sherman made that decision. It's Bruce's call to bring in Peter Bendix. And the reason you bring in Peter Bendix is to run the organization in a way akin to the Tampa Bay Rays. So as soon as that appointment was made, you knew exactly what the plan would be. And for that plan to work, for the Rays plan and Rays model to be delivered, it's effectively based on a farm system that is deep and rich with talent, and an approach to the big league roster where effectively you cycle through guys when they're cheap. No, you use guys when they're cheap, and then you move them on and just continually cycle guys and cycle talent. You never commit to guys long term. That's the model. That's just the operating model of the Rays. That's what Peter Bendix has learned. He came in as an intern. He's learned everything about them. He knows that model inside out. That's not to say that he was the key decision maker and he built that from the ground up. He didn't. He's just been a piece of the puzzle there. And for me, that's the most intriguing thing with Peter Bendix, is considering all of the other inputs, all the other minds would have had in that organization to get it where it gotten to, and continues to be in many ways. Can Peter Bendix replicate that on his own? And he's surrounded himself with a ton of minds as well. But can Peter Bendix replicate it? That's the key question. The key question. He comes from the Rays. It's a tick. He knows and understands. It's a tick. He's a very smart guy. We get it. That's a tick. But now the training wheels are off and the decision ends with him. It's a different situation. It's a very different situation to what he faced in Tampa, where he kind of worked his way up and ended up as the GM. Very different. Full ownership of everything. Full responsibility of everything. It's going to be very interesting. Let's go back. So Peter Bendix hired. We all knew what that meant. I've talked about it plenty on this podcast. I knew what it meant. Anyone that's in arbitration right now will be moved at some point in the near term. So that was what was expected. That was my expectation. You then get into the offseason itself, coming off the postseason. My view was the core primarily remained from a postseason team, and I get it. There was a degree of fortune in there. A lot of things went in the Marlins' favor. Was it sustainable? Was it realistic to double down on that? It's a good question. The approach to the offseason suggested that no, Peter Bendix didn't believe that really this was a sustainable team and a roster to compete. He did the bare minimum, which was move Birdie and bring in Tim Anderson. Already, Birdie, he already called it. This one's more for the future. We get it. So already there was a slight kind of tilt to the rebuild there. Sandy, obviously missing for the year. Slew of injuries. But the offseason activity happened way before the pitching injuries. The offseason activity said, we don't think we can win, or we think we can win with this current group, which I don't think is the case. There was loads of guys available that the Marlins could have gotten, but they decided not to. The inactivity in the offseason said to me that Peter Bendix didn't believe for 24. That's what it said to me. And actually, Peter Bendix's model, his plan, his vision, his strategy, and the objectives all align to everyone in ARB I'm going to sell now or soon enough. And so we start to see that now, right? So we know the Rays model. The Rays are a super successful team on a low budget. Yes, they've never won a World Series, but they have given themselves plenty of opportunities. If, considering how we enjoyed last season, let's remember in 23, the Marlins had an 84-win season, made the postseason. They got bounced in the wild card. And honestly, it was the best season that many fans have ever seen. It was the best season that Marlins fans had seen maybe in 20 years. Maybe there were other kind of 1 or 2 seasons sprinkled in between. But, you know, the Rays, on the other hand, are having, you know, year after year after year, they're winning divisions. They're in the ALDS. They're in the ALCS. They're in the World Series. Like, you look at the Rays and what they were able to do in terms of how frequently they're in the postseason. You have to admire that. You have to admire the model. No doubt about it. And I understand the model. And it's the model that's going to work for this market because for whatever reason, Bruce Sherman doesn't have the financial capabilities to just throw endless dough at it. It's not a Steve Cohen situation. Just imagine Steve Cohen in Miami. Just imagine, I mean, it hasn't really gone that well in the Mets, to be fair, but just imagine if you had Steve Cohen, money, and maybe Peter Bendix's mind. Just what would that look like? What could that look like? But the point I'm saying here, and I don't want to, I got to hit the first ad as well, actually, and then we'll carry on this conversation. But for me, with Bruce Sherman as the owner, knowing what we know about the way he wants to run this team, which is pretty much a bottom 5 payroll forevermore for his own reasons or, you know, for whatever reasons, you know, frankly, you know, he doesn't have the available funds to up that budget. Maybe there's a degree of profitability based on the current payroll. I don't know. I don't think anyone really knows the truth around that because it's not a publicly traded organization. We don't have access to the financials to understand the exact situation in terms of profit and loss for the Marlins and Bruce Sherman specifically. So we'll never know. But I think all we can do at this point is to assume that a Bruce Sherman-owned Marlins will always be predominantly a bottom 5, bottom 10 payroll. And if that's to be the case, then you have to be super smart about how you draft, how you develop, how you churn talent in terms of trades, and how you have waves coming through. I get it. The funny thing is, again, I only became a baseball fan in 2016. The funny thing is, Derek Jeter walked through the door after selling off all of these guys that I fell in love with. These were the guys that made me fall in love with baseball and the Marlins specifically. It could have been anyone. I could have been a Cardinals fan. I could have been anyone. But it was that Marlins team with Stanton, Ozuna, Yelich, Realmuto, Jose Fernandez that made me fall in love with the game. And then all of a sudden, a year in, everyone's got to go, I was told. I was like, what the hell's going on? It was painful the first time, but I got it. The team, whilst the offense on paper looked good, the pitching was putrid. There was a clear gap. There was a clear problem, and you had to address that. And so I kind of understood and accepted where we were at that point. Derek Jeter rolls in and tells me, as a fan, this isn't sustainable. We need to build layers on layers of talent and depth, something along those lines. It's effectively the same message that Peter Bendix is delivering. And I think this is, again, going back to the frustrations and why Marlins fans, me included, there's a few areas of this, but specifically on this messaging, when there's a rebuild, it's going to take time, give me time, sustainable success, etc., etc. The problem is this is a repeat. This is the repeat of what the Marlins fan base has been told continually. Every 5 years, they're told the same thing. And it always ends up in the same situation. The difference here is maybe you have the right person. Finally, you have the right person finally steering the ship in Peter Bendix. Because, frankly, Derek Jeter was not qualified to be in the role that he was in. And he was a control freak. Everything had to go through him. He did not leave his ego at the door, Derek Jeter. He didn't. Everything went through him, and that held the organization back. He then hired people that he knew, which makes sense because he doesn't know what he's doing. And he hires people that he knew. They ended up being bad hires. So all of a sudden, you've got a guy who doesn't know what he's doing, hiring people that are crap at what they do. And next thing is, well, you're in this situation. That's at the heart of it with Jeter. That's my summary on it anyway. The face fit, but the experience didn't. The ability didn't. And thus, that rebuild failed. There's not been any layers on layers of talent. The farm system at one point looked really sexy. This is, again, another problem we face as Marlins fans and why we struggle to buy what we're being sold. Because we've been in this situation before. You've got a top 5 farm. So how are we only 2 years on with a bottom 5 farm and a couple of average years, below average years to show for it? Prospects and farm systems, in some ways, they're a mirage. You just don't know. You don't know until these guys get to the big leagues. Just because you're drafted in the first round, it means nothing, frankly. It means nothing, particularly a guy out of high school, Dylan Head, for example. I'm going to talk about him a bit later on as well. But farm systems, rankings, it means nothing. It's a mirage. Complete mirage. The true acid test is at the big league level. And what we saw in the previous build was too many of those guys that the Marlins built around failed. They failed. And what we need to see, what we need to trust in is Peter Bendix and his guys can identify talent, firstly, and develop it. That's the second point. They have to find a way to identify good talent. And I go back to the Jacob Berry pick, by the way. For me, again, it's a sliding doors moment where I don't think Jacob Berry should have ever been a first-round pick ever in a million years. For some reason, the Marlins took him where they did. And you have to draft well. Then you've got to develop. So it's a 2-stage process, right? Svihlik absolutely bombed out on that pick. I don't know who made that pick for Jacob Berry, but if it was DJ Svihlik, it was an absolute disaster. No doubt. So let's hit the first ad. I want to continue on in this because there's more to say. There's more that I want to say about how I'm feeling about this rebuild and how other Marlins fans are feeling about it. And Marlins fans are split. And there's a few topics here that we need to cover. So we're going to do that. Before we do that, it's time to let you know, firstly, about our good friends over at LinkedIn. Yes, sir. So let's get the sexy graphic pumped up for LinkedIn. And are you struggling to close deals? Peter Bendix is not. B2B selling is tougher than ever. And that's why I want to tell you about LinkedIn Sales Navigator. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high-value customers, drive higher revenues, and increase sales performance. Sales Navigator helps you target the right buyers, surface key signals, such as job changes or which accounts you should prioritize, and shows you hidden allies so you can find those buyers that are most likely to convert. Fueled by LinkedIn's 1 billion member platform, Sales Navigator gives you the most up-to-date first-party data, enabling you to unlock conversations with the people that matter. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon. That's linkedin.com/lockedon for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/lockedon and get started. This episode is also brought to you by our good friends over at Monopoly Go. If I can find the graphics for them. Yes, I can. All right, game off, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You've already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. Unique stickers that you can trade with friends. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis to taunt your friends when you smash their building or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. And there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent. Frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or App Store. Game on! All right, guys, welcome back to Locked On Marlins with me, Peter Pratt. We are talking rebuilds. I wanted to lay it out how I'm feeling as a fan. It's an emotive period. It's been an emotional few days for us as Marlins fans. Luis Arraez signaling very much Peter Bendix's intent. He's already been telling us, but not directly. But moving Arraez was a direct call to the fans that this is what's happening. And it takes time to adjust to that. Luis Arraez, fan favorite. A guy that you felt like you could build around. For me, with Luis Arraez, by the way, it's funny how fans of other clubs, I feel, don't know Luis Arraez. They hear about Luis Arraez because he's hitting 350 and going for 400 last year and etc. They'll go and look him up on Fangraphs or whatever it might be, and they'll make the same assessment that many do. This is the problem. This is the problem when you analyze players by looking up their stats and comparing them to others and etc. etc. That is the problem. You have to use your eyes. And if you used your eyes to watch your eyes, and most people won't because they're looking at the stats. They're not a fan of the Marlins. They're not going to watch the Marlins. I watch the Marlins every day, and I can tell you Arraez is one of the best hitters I've ever seen, ever. Okay, that's from 2016 onwards. But Arraez is immense as a hitter. And I know it's, glorified singles hitter, etc. Take that away. Arraez is immense as a hitter. He is so valuable because, frankly, hitting baseballs is hard, very hard. But Arraez somehow makes it look easy, no doubt. Definitely the second base situation has dropped away this year. Something's gone on. Last year it wasn't there, but he started the year shaky at second. I don't know why. But Luis Arraez, top player, top clubhouse guy. You've heard it all before now. You've heard all the stories, right? Everyone talking about him glowingly. Massive influence, and I love the fit with the Padres. And surprise, surprise, he has a 4-hit day to get it rolling. So Luis Arraez moved. There's an emotive response to that because as a fan, and I'm a fan, you guys listening are all fans. There's an emotive response that you have where one of your best players is moved. Now, what that signals is it's over. It's over already. We already maybe would have assumed that it was over. And like I said, Peter Bendix was hired and we knew what this meant. But it's all well and good knowing what the plan could be and then starting to see what that actually means here and now. Luis Arraez traded for 3 prospects and a reliever, plus the money situation that I didn't actually cover with Danny Alvarez at the time. We didn't know about that when we covered it. Let me just briefly dig into that trade. I thought it was very funny. I think it's a very funny situation. I just want to say about that trade specifically. A lot of people like the trade for the Marlins. And I get it. Again, because it comes down to, hey, well, it's Luis Arraez. He's got no speed, no power, no defense, no value, no control. The Marlins should absolutely move him. And I completely get that point of view. No doubt. The team's crap as well. Team's crap. Get it. To counter that, I just want to call out. Getting elite hitters, finding elite hitters has not been a skill the Marlins have been very good at in the years that I followed the club. Luis Arraez is an elite hitter. They have someone there that is young enough and a skill set that likely won't diminish rapidly. That I get the need to rebuild or maybe add talent to the farm. I get the need. I do. But on the flip side, is there a few guys that are young enough and that you like the profile enough that you could build around? Could you have extended Luis Arraez? Well, they haven't extended him. Interested to see what the Padres do, no doubt. Could you have? The reality is Arraez maybe one of the best assets for the Marlins. For the Padres anyway. They liked the player. They were happy with the cost. So, Arraez gone. The prospects back. This is the funny thing. You then have Keith Law out putting his overview of the deal. It was a very interesting read, I have to say. Firstly, me and Keith Law, we don't see eye to eye. He blocked me on Twitter a few years ago because I called out his top 100 list saying it was garbage. Frankly, because He had Christian Pache at like a top 10 prospect and no Max Meyer in the top 100. He thought I was wrong on that. I wasn't wrong, by the way. But Keith Law doesn't walk back blocks, I guess, on that point. Anyway, moving on from Keith Law. So his analysis of this trade is they've signed Dylan Head. Okay, and Dylan Head comes with an 80 grade speed. So all I hear about Dylan Head, he is the main get for the Marlins in this deal. Okay, great. And why is that? Mr. Law and everyone else that's analyzing these prospects. Why is Dylan Head the crown jewel prospect the Marlins have acquired? Because he's got 80 grade speed. Come on, guys. I'm not having that. I am not having it that we scroll to the projections and we see 80 grade speed and then think, great, this guy's going to be an absolute stud because he can run fast. No, I'm not having that. There's probably other things in his profile that are good. Granted. But 80 grade speed, you could not sell me on that. I've seen 80 grade Mag Sierra. I've seen 80 grade Monte Harrison. No. The way Keith Law described it is you've effectively got a guy who can run fast but can't hit. We've had enough of them. So, okay, Keith Law. Thank you for that. We've then got a guy that is being projected as a fourth outfielder. Okay, great. We've got enough of them. Plenty of them. You've got another guy that sounds like Jacob Berry in some ways, 2.0, and then a reliever that's effectively being dumped across for money, to balance out some money, even more money. $4.5 million the Marlins are taking on there for this dude that clearly the Padres don't think is any good. And then Keith Law declares that a fat win for the Marlins. A fast guy that can't hit, a fourth outfielder, a reliever that is there to balance the money, and Jacob Berry 2.0. Come on! How are we declaring that as a win? I'm emotive about this because Arraez is elite. And in my opinion, elite guys, it's hard to see them go. Particularly when you don't get elite prospects back on the face of it. I'm not a prospect guy. Any of these guys could be amazing. Who knows? But they frankly could all be terrible. All of them. There's no guarantees, as Peter Bendix would say. Anyway, I thought that was a really interesting article where, like I said, Keith Law described all of those dudes in pretty much that way and then called it a fat win for the Marlins. Probably because people don't value Arraez like I do. Or maybe Marlins fans. You have to watch Arraez to know the value he brings. You can't just look it up and go, oh, well, he's a -8 defensive run saved. He's crap. He's got a dodgy knee. He's only hit 10 home runs last year. He's crap. Luis Arraez, absolute stud. Okay. So, just want to call this out. I am not anti-Peter Bendix. Not at all. The thing with Peter Bendix now that I'm liking is we now know the direction. Again, he's not quite saying the direction. One eye to the present, one eye to the future. Still rolls on with that language. They don't want to use the word rebuild. But it is a rebuild. And it's going to be a deep rebuild in that all of the talent, arbitration eligible, will be moved. Probably in the next 12 months. That includes the guy that headlined the top of this show, Jazz Chisholm Jr. So, the Marlins fans have been sold this many times before. However, I am a Peter Bendix believer. I believe that he is the best person that the Marlins have ever had in role when trying to do this type of activity. He's the right guy for the right job on the face of it. So I wanted to state that and let everyone know I am not an anti-Bendix guy. I am an anti-rebuild guy for an organization that is always rebuilding. That's the frustrating part. Give it time. Well, I've already just given it 5 years, and now you want to ask me for another 5. I want to see, what I care about is the major league team being good every year. And if you can't do it because maybe you've missed a few drafts, maybe a few trades have gone sideways, maybe a few guys have got hurt, fine. That's when you turn to Bruce Sherman and you say, Bruce, for this next year or two, while we restock our farm with the drafts and maybe a few minor trades, whatever it might be, in that period, we're going to need you to supplement We're going to need you, Bruce Sherman, to supplement the roster with some additional spending for now. It's not the long-term thing. We're not asking you to commit $300 million or whatever it might be to, I don't know, Xander Bogaerts, whatever it was a few years back. That isn't it. The challenge that the Marlins fan base has and why everyone is so frustrated is this is the reoccurring situation that this club has faced throughout its history. Peter Bendix likely is going to give it a good go. He likely will make a success of this. The timeline is 3 to 5 years before you see anything meaningful on the field and at the big league level. That's 2027, 2028, 2029, somewhere in that range before we see anything meaningful from this build. Let's just be honest. The crown jewel in the Luis Arraez trade. He's 19. So when's he going to be ready? 2028 at best? You know, this is going to be long. Jazz Chisholm Jr., Rob Nightingale talking about him today. He's going to be moved. Jesus Luzardo, they've already tried to move in the offseason. Edward Cabrera, they've also tried to move in the offseason. Tanner Scott will be moved. Josh Bell will be moved. Tim Anderson will be moved. All of these guys will be moved. Let's hit the final ad, and then we're going to wrap this bad boy up because I'm going long, but a lot to say. It's an emotive period. Let me know in the comments what you're thinking. Where's your head at? Are you accepting the build? How are you feeling about Peter Bendix generally? Do you trust him? Do you trust him to deliver? Do you care? Are you watching Marlins baseball anymore? If you're not, when will you show back up? Loads of questions. Final out of the day, and it's our good friends over at Yahoo Finance. Yes, sir. So we get the Yahoo Finance rolling on here. There we go. Guys, let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising costs of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and financial freedom, right? With Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, data, that's in American, and tools that you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, emergency podcasts, I guess, and original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. So, for a comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. All right, guys, final segment here with me, Peter Pratt, on Monday, the 6th of May. Greetings. Happy Bank Holiday Monday to all the UK listeners. This episode is already long, so I think I'm going to wrap it up here in many ways and just kind of end on a summary, really, with the Arraez trade was personal to all Marlins fans because of how good he is, how young he is, how much of a spark plug he's been, how much we've enjoyed watching Luis Arraez. We had to move Pablo Lopez and Salas to get him. And just over a year later, he's gone. Kaiser Soze time. So that's painful for the Marlins fans to accept. We're in that period of acceptance in this rebuild now. We know what this entails. We know that Jazz Chisholm Jr. will be moved sooner rather than later. For me, with Jesus Luzardo, and I said this to Danny Alvarez on the emergency pod, with Luzardo, as soon as he's back, and it sounds like he's back very soon, as soon as Luzardo's back, Peter Bendix should be looking to move him rapido. Why? Well, he's already been hurt once this year. What you don't want is Luzardo getting hurt again. The injuries continue to mount up everywhere across the league. Luzardo is probably, in terms of trade value, he probably has the highest trade value linked to what he showed last year and the years of control. So with that deal, it needs to be right. The Luzardo deal is probably the biggest deal that Bendix has to make, and he has to get it right. And there's some great fits. There's some really great fits. But I do wonder if you leave that one nearer to the deadline, or do you go now? I think it's a real fine balance for Peter Bendix. Secondary to that, it's Jazz Chisholm Jr. in terms of trade value, let's say. I think Braxton Garrett on the trade values website is slightly higher than Jazz. But, you know, with Jazz, the health has been there thus far. It's definitely, you know, it's funny yesterday, you know, in the game where he's in the leadoff spot, he takes a walk and steals 2 bags. The next thing is he's, you know, bringing a run in. You know, that's Jazz Chisholm Jr. in a nutshell, right? And I think he's added the walks to his game this year. He's looking more of a rounded hitter at this point. He's still showing the power. He's still showing the speed. He's showing the health. He's showing the defense out in center field. And Jazz is kind of doing everything that was asked of him. And I get it, though. People will kind of flash up, you know, war stats and go, hey, Miguel Rojas has got a higher war than Jazz Chisholm Jr. at this point in this season. I get it. Who would you prefer in your lineup? Miguel Rojas or Jazz Chisholm Jr.? Or is this another situation where, like Arraez, most people don't value Arraez and his skill set? Is it the same with Jazz? Or, as Marlins fans, is there a degree of fatigue around Jazz Chisholm Jr. where he hasn't stayed healthy every season? Some people don't like his attitude, the swag, whatever it might be. I feel like we're in that point with Marlins fans where there's definitely a split on Jazz. You know I'm Team Jazz. I love everything about Jazz. His on-field abilities, electric. There's definitely a fraction of Marlins fans that feel the complete opposite around Jazz. Billy Big Time, that talks a good game but doesn't deliver one. I'm really interested to see where Jazz ends up. And like I've mentioned multiple times, the Dodgers have a definite problem at second base. So Miguel Rojas and Jazz Chisholm Jr. in the infield for the Dodgers, could that be one? Could be really interesting. I could also, by the way, see Tanner Scott in the Dodgers bullpen, no doubt. Wouldn't shock me if it ended up being Jazz and Tanner Scott to the Dodgers. Again, the Marlins, what we've already seen with this Arraez deal is they are going to be willing to do what it takes to get the best return irrespective of the financial cost this year. They effectively retained Arraez's money. They also took on money from the Padres to make sure they got the 3 guys that they really wanted. Keith Law described them well. A fast guy that can't hit, a 4th outfielder, and Jacob Berry 2.0. But Peter Bendix wanted them. Even so, guys, we're going to wrap it up there. The rebuild is on. It's the same message. Give it time. We're looking for layers of talent for a consistent winner. It's the same message that Derek Jeter delivered. However, the difference maker is Peter Bendix is qualified. The people in the organization are qualified. Derek Jeter rocked in. He wasn't qualified. The people he then brought in were poor at executing at what they should have been doing. That's why the Marlins are back in this situation. Bruce Sherman has always said he wants to run the organization in this way. Nothing has deviated. Bruce Sherman came in, brought Jeter in. They said, we want to create the Rays then. They tried to do it. They couldn't make it happen. Next round of front office guys to make that vision happen. Bruce Sherman hasn't changed. Derek Jeter, Dembo, Svilic, they left the Marlins in a bad hole. Bendix is in. Let's see what he can do. He comes from an organization that has proven they can do it. The question is can Peter Bendix step up and actually deliver when he's the head honcho? It's a pressure job for him. He's a smart guy. As Marlins fans, all we can do is trust in Bendix ball at this point. That's all we can do. There's a lot of rebuild fatigue in the organization. But I think once the initial pain subsides, when all of your stud guys are moved in the next 12 months, 6 months, 3 months, whatever it might be, I think everyone will fully embrace Bendix ball and the hope of a world-class Marlins organization to appear in the coming years. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen, guys. I've been Peter Pratt. That's been a 40 minutes. I went on 10 minutes long, but a lot to talk about at the moment. Back tomorrow. Look forward to seeing you then.